My name is Claire Thompson. I'm 32 years old, and last night my father tried to humiliate me at his own retirement party. He stood there, smiling in front of hundreds of guests, mocking me like he always had, telling the crowd I couldn't keep a job, that I'd never be capable of running anything. The room laughed with him, just as they always did, because no one ever questioned his words. What no one knew was that the spotlight he thought belonged to him was about to shift. Minutes later, the CEO of his company walked in with a golden envelope that would change everything. My father thought the name inside belonged to someone he'd chosen, someone who would carry on his legacy. He couldn't imagine the truth. When the CEO opened that envelope and spoke my name, the laughter stopped. The crowd gasped. My father's grin collapsed in front of everyone who had worshipped him for years. And in that moment, the legacy he had spent his life protecting slipped right out of his hands, into mine. This is the story of how a daughter he dismissed took the empire he thought untouchable, and how, for the first time, he was the one left in silence. The ballroom was dressed like a stage. Crystal chandeliers cast light that shimmered across polished floors, and round tables clothed in white linen held plates no one touched because the real feast was the attention. My father stood at the center of it all, the hero of the night, a man celebrated for 40 years of building something from the ground up. Or so everyone thought. The speeches, the laughter, the endless clinking of glasses, it was all for him. And I was just another guest, another name on the seating chart, though my blood was his. I'd been pushed into the second row of tables, far enough back that no one noticed when I wasn't smiling. But he noticed. He always noticed me. The daughter who never measured up, who couldn't, in his words, carry the weight of a family name. He used to say it only behind closed doors. When no one else could hear the truth, he carved into me with every jab. Tonight, he decided to sharpen the knife in public. With a half smile and a glass raised high, he looked in my direction. His voice carried easily, smooth from years of knowing how to command a room. "And here's my daughter," he announced, his tone edged with a sneer that only I could fully hear, though everyone else laughed because they thought it was just another one of his jokes. "This one? Can't even keep a job, let alone run anything." Laughter erupted. Some clapped, others shook their heads with amused disbelief, and a few glanced at me with pity that stung more than the insult. My cheeks burned, but my face stayed still, lips curling in the faintest of smiles. I'd learned long ago that showing him my hurt only fed him more. Tonight, it wasn't hurt that pulsed beneath my skin, it was patience. Because unlike everyone else in that room, I already knew what was coming. The applause and chatter dimmed only when the tall doors at the back of the hall swung open. A man stepped in, dressed in a tailored suit with the kind of presence that silenced without asking. The CEO of my father's company. A figure who rarely appeared at gatherings like this unless the moment demanded wait. The music stuttered to a stop, waiters froze mid-pour, and the room shifted, sensing something important was about to happen. He carried a golden envelope, and the metallic sheen caught the light in a way that made people lean forward in curiosity. My father straightened, puffing out his chest, pride radiating as if the spotlight belonged to him alone. He thought he knew what was about to be announced. He thought this was the moment where his chosen successor, someone groomed to follow in his shadow, would be crowned. The CEO reached the stage, adjusted the microphone, and spoke with calm authority. "Tonight, we celebrate the legacy of a man who dedicated his life to this company. But we also look to the future. And with that, it's my honor to reveal who will be taking over the leadership of this organization moving forward." The hall leaned in, breath held, eyes darting to my father, expecting his name to remain etched in stone through the person he'd chosen. My father's smile stretched wide, his eyes sparkling with certainty. He already imagined the applause, the congratulations, the reassurance that his control extended even beyond his retirement. The CEO opened the envelope, unfolded the paper slowly, deliberately, and read aloud. "My name." The sound of it crashed into the room, louder than the chandeliers, louder than the collective gasp that followed. The silence that came after was almost cruel in its clarity. My father's smile faltered, then shattered, his confident mask slipping away piece by piece until all that was left was disbelief. I rose from my chair without rushing, without hesitation. Each step I took forward was measured, deliberate, the kind of movement that told the audience this moment wasn't an accident. It was inevitable. The CEO extended his hand to me, and I took it, the applause swelling around us, filling the air my father thought belonged to him alone. When I finally looked at him, I saw the pale cast of his face, the way his eyes widened, searching for some explanation, some mistake, some way to rewrite what had just been spoken.
But there was no mistake.
I leaned in just enough for him to hear me over the roar of the crowd, my voice steady and quiet, cutting through the noise like glass against silk. Still think I can't run anything? The words hung between us, sharp, undeniable. His silence answered for him. The clapping didn't fade. It lingered, echoing like a drumbeat inside the hall, but none of it belonged to him anymore. My father sat frozen in his chair, lips pressed together as though holding back words he could no longer speak. For the first time in my life, he didn't have control of the room. Every eye shifted from him to me. Every whisper bent toward my name, not his. The air carried my victory and his downfall at the same time. I shook the CEO's hand firmly, felt the weight of the golden envelope still resting in his palm, and took it as he stepped aside. The crowd cheered louder, though it wasn't just celebration, it was shock breaking into acceptance. People wanted to attach themselves to whoever carried the future, and tonight that was me. Faces that had smirked at my father's joke minutes earlier now tilted with admiration, as if they hadn't laughed at my expense. That hypocrisy wasn't lost on me. I'd learned long ago that loyalty in rooms like this belonged to power, not people. When I returned to my seat, I didn't sit next to him. I moved closer to the front, near the CEO and the executives whose approval suddenly carried less weight than mine. The distance I put between us wasn't physical, it was permanent. The microphone clicked again, pulling attention back to the stage. The CEO announced, "A new chapter begins tonight." Leadership doesn't come from where you expect it. It comes from resilience, vision, and the ability to stand tall when underestimated. That is why she was chosen. His gaze landed on me as he spoke, and murmurs spread through the tables like fire catching dry grass. My father leaned forward, his knuckles white against the tablecloth, jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might break his teeth. He couldn't interrupt. He couldn't shout over the applause. He was trapped in silence while the room rewrote its allegiance in real time. After the speeches ended, music returned, but it felt different now. The band played softer, as if even they understood the night had shifted. Guests circled me, offering congratulations, shaking my hand, speaking my name with reverence. Each compliment was a small blade twisting into my father, because not one of those words was directed toward him anymore. He tried to smile, to pretend he was still the star of the evening, but the lines around his mouth betrayed him. I caught his eyes once across the room. He held my gaze for only a second before looking away, as though unable to face the truth. The night carried on with practiced glamour, but underneath it all, tension hummed. Relatives whispered in corners, some curious, others suspicious, wondering how this had been arranged. My cousins asked polite questions I didn't answer directly. Aunts who had once pitied me now gripped my hand a little too tightly, their tone shifting to praise laced with envy. They wanted to understand how I had managed what no one thought possible. But I didn't give them answers. Some things weren't meant for everyone. Later, after the last speech and the final toast, I slipped away from the tables and walked out into the corridor. The noise dulled behind me, replaced by quiet marble hallways and dim golden light. I needed air, distance from the performance still unfolding inside. I wasn't surprised when I heard the heavy footsteps follow. He always confronted me in private, never in front of an audience, when the risk of losing composure was too high. I stopped near a tall window, its glass reflecting the city lights, and turned as he appeared. His face carried the strain of the night, cheeks pale, forehead lined deeper than usual, eyes restless. For a man who had thrived on dominance, the loss showed quickly. "You think this is funny?" His voice was low, clipped, almost strangled. "Standing there like you earned it? You don't even understand what it takes to run a company like this." I didn't flinch. They wouldn't have chosen me if I couldn't. He stepped closer, his breath unsteady. They made a mistake. That CEO, you must have tricked him, manipulated him into believing you're capable. Or maybe, I replied, keeping my tone even, he saw what you've spent years trying to bury. His glare hardened, but I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He wasn't used to being challenged, least of all by me. His entire life, he'd built his identity around being unshakable. Tonight, I shook him. You're not ready for this, he pressed, his words rushed now. You'll collapse the first time you're tested. Then wait and watch, I said. You've always waited for me to fail. This time, you'll have a front row seat. For a moment, silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. He searched my expression, looking for the same fear I used to show whenever he tore me down. He didn't find it. That was what frightened him most. The sound of footsteps broke the tension. A board member entered the corridor, glancing between us. My father quickly straightened, forcing his expression into something neutral, but it was too late. The cracks had already shown. The board member nodded politely to me, ignoring him, then moved on. Another knife in his pride. When we re-entered the hall, the shift was even more obvious. Executives and shareholders crowded around me, voices eager, full of ideas, ready to align themselves with the future. My father stood to the side, left in the shadows of the very company he'd thought would always belong to him. He tried to join conversations, but people subtly turned their backs, directing their energy toward me instead. I didn't have to do anything. The room itself declared the transfer of power. When the hall finally emptied and the staff cleared tables, I remained behind with the CEO. We spoke quietly near the stage. He explained the decision had been made months ago, sealed before tonight, based not only on my qualifications but on my vision for where the company could go. I had earned it, though he warned me the road ahead would be ruthless.
That didn't scare me.
I had already faced worse. The morning after the party, the city looked unchanged, but everything in my world had shifted. I woke knowing the company was mine. Not a promise, not a possibility, but a fact signed into the records and sealed in that golden envelope. My phone buzzed nonstop, executives requesting meetings, employees sending congratulations, board members eager to set appointments. The weight of responsibility was heavy, yes, but it didn't frighten me. I had carried heavier things in silence for years, the kind no one in that ballroom would ever understand. When I arrived at the office for the first time as its new leader, the building seemed taller, as though it had been waiting for me to see it differently. Employees lined the lobby, clapping politely, some genuinely excited, others watching to see how long I would last. My father had shaped this company with his own hands, and many believed no one else could keep it standing. I intended to prove them wrong. I walked into the boardroom with my head high. The tables stretched long and polished, surrounded by faces that studied me carefully. The CEO who had announced my name the night before sat at the head for the final time. It's official, he said, sliding a folder toward me. You're the one guiding this company forward. I opened it, saw my signature line already waiting, and signed without hesitation. The moment the pen left the paper, the room shifted. Every person there knew nothing would return to how it had been. But not everyone accepted it. That afternoon, I received a message. My father wanted to see me. No office, no formal request, just a demand, written in clipped words that still carried authority he no longer held. I agreed, because I knew this conversation was inevitable. We met in his study, the same room where he had built his empire late into the nights of my childhood. The walls were lined with framed photos of him shaking hands with men who had once defined his career, awards that gleamed under warm lights, shelves of books no one touched. He sat behind the desk as if it were still his throne, though it had already been stripped from him. You think you've won, he said immediately, voice low but sharp. You think last night made you untouchable. Let me tell you something. This company isn't what you believe. It takes blood to keep it alive. I sacrificed everything to build it. And you, walking in with nothing, think you can hold it? I didn't sit. I faced him standing. The board didn't choose me out of pity. They chose me because I see what you refuse to see, that this company doesn't need to be ruled by fear anymore. It needs to grow beyond your shadow. His laugh was bitter, hollow. Beyond my shadow? Without me, there is no company. Those people who cheered for you last night? They'll turn the second you stumble. Then I won't stumble, I said. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You're not ready. You'll ruin everything I built. No, I replied, steady and clear. You already ruined it. You taught loyalty meant silence. You thought power meant control. But what people respected last night wasn't fear. It was change. They don't want another version of you. They want something new. He slammed his hand against the desk, the sound echoing through the study. I made you. Don't forget that. Everything you have comes from me. I took a breath, then leaned closer. And everything you are ends with me. His face froze, the words hitting harder than he expected. For the first time, he had no response. He sat back, his shoulders slumping as though the fight had finally drained from him. His silence said what he couldn't. He knew it was over. I left the study without another word. The door closed behind me with a finality I'd never felt before. That chapter of my life, the one where his voice dictated my worth, ended in that moment. The weeks that followed tested me. Meetings ran late, strategies clashed, competitors circled like wolves, waiting for me to falter. But I didn't. I made decisions swiftly, carried myself with precision, and every move I made silenced another doubt. The company's numbers began to climb, not just steady but rising in ways they hadn't under his reign. People who once whispered now spoke with certainty. I wasn't just his daughter. I was the leader they needed. My father tried, at first, to insert himself back in. He called board members, reached out to allies, attempted to sway opinion. But each time, he found doors closed, voices unreturned, alliances shifting away. Slowly, the network he had controlled unraveled, strand by strand, until he was left on the outside looking in. The final blow came months later at the annual shareholders meeting. I stood at the podium, presenting growth numbers, unveiling new strategies, outlining expansions that pushed the company into markets my father never dared to enter. The applause was strong, not forced, not polite, it was earned. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, and my name filled the room louder than his ever had. At the back of the hall, I saw him. He wasn't at the center anymore, not on stage, not surrounded by admirers. He sat alone, expression unreadable, watching me command the crowd he used to own. Our eyes met, and I held his gaze just long enough to let him understand. This wasn't his legacy anymore. It was mine. After the meeting, he approached me once more, slower this time. No anger in his voice, just resignation. You did it, he said quietly, almost to himself. I didn't think you could, but you did. I nodded. Because you never wanted to see me. He sighed, shoulders heavy, eyes dull. It's yours now. All of it. Just remember, it will never love you back. I don't need it to, I replied. I only need it to follow. And with that, he turned and walked away, not with the stride of a man in control, but with the steps of someone who had finally accepted the end.